Welcome to the Lentil Intervention Podcast, talking all things movement, whole food nutrition and environmental wellness with your hosts, Ben and Emma.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 13. My name is Ben Alderwood, coming to you from Auckland, New Zealand, and joined as always by my co-host Emma Strutt in Boona, Queensland. Hello Emma.
G'day Ben, how are you going today?
Very good, thank you. Coming off a long weekend, I think we all are. So you've had some nice time away?
I have, yes. I got my nature fix over the weekend, which was lovely. So I'm feeling refreshed and ready to roll.
Excellent. So let's literally roll. And actually there's a bit of a play on that because of our next guest and his involvement with some things to do with wheels. But just a reminder to our listeners, if you do enjoy this podcast, firstly, please subscribe so you don't miss any forthcoming episodes. And give us a rating if you can as well. And also, if you do enjoy our content, please do support us by buying us a coffee. Emma, who's our next guest?
Okay, so today we are joined by Dr. Martyn Williamson. He's a general practitioner based in Alexandra, Southland, and is also a senior lecturer in the Department of General Practice and Rural Health at the University of Otago. In addition to his teaching and research work, Martyn is passionate about lifestyle medicine and co-founded Life Strong Health with his lovely wife Liz to help educate and support people in making positive, healthful changes in their lives and on their plates. So Martyn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Kia ora. Lovely to see you guys, and thanks for the invite to talk.
Martyn, to kick off, tell us a little bit about yourself. I think you are our... well, not first guest, but our southernmost guest we've had on the show so far. So tell us a little bit about your background, what you do and what got you into the current lifestyle that you live.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So I grew up in the northeast of England, in the Newcastle, Durham area in North Yorkshire, and sort of went straight to medical school from school. And went on to a GP training scheme from there. So I felt I'd kind of been on tram lines all the way, and I'd had a sniff of rural practice while I was a medical student, and I wanted to try rural practice around the world. So in 1986, I landed a job in a tiny place called Owaka, which is on the Catalans coast of South Otago. Came out and absolutely loved it. We could do all the outdoor things that I was really interested in, and also enjoyed the style of work. Liz came out, liked it as well. We actually got married in Owaka, and we liked New Zealand so much that we decided that we'd stay long enough to get permanent residence and then citizenship. And I ended up working in Lawrence. And which was really great, part of being part of a rural community. And you see a whole lot of diseases. So farmers dealing with their chronic disease, and it struck me I was limited in what I could do for folk like that. I started off into general practice, bringing with it a huge enthusiasm that I was going to provide people with the best treatment, the best medication, right up to date. And I did all of that stuff, and people deteriorated in front of my eyes, basically, because what they had wasn't amenable to medical treatment. So people still had heart attacks, their diabetes got worse, their vision was worsened. They'd lose toes and feet and things like that, plus all the cancer and then autoimmune disease and so on. So I realised that actually modern medicine, most of the work for GPs dealing with stuff that you can diagnose and we've got medication for, but you can't actually stop the disease. And that's always bugged me. And Liz and I've, on another track, Liz and I have always enjoyed activity and the outdoors. And so I used to play a lot of squash in those days, and what we got into when we were in Lawrence was triathlon, duathlon, and from there we hooked into the road cycling, road racing scene. So we got addicted to road racing, which was really exciting. And when we had our kids, our whole family grew up with us toddling off to the weekend race, and usually some of the bystanders would look after the kids. So the kids grew up with cycling, so they got into cycling and did well. And that was kind of really an expression of an interest that we've had in a healthy lifestyle. And probably it would be fair to say that over the time I would have slipped and slid a little bit from that, making compromises, and I did. And it's Liz who over our married life has really had her eye on that ball. That we value being fit so that we can just go and do whatever we want to do, whenever we want to do it. And so that's good for your mental health as well. So we took the kids cycling in the Alps and Pyrenees, with a couple of tandems and whatnot. Had an absolutely marvellous holiday, and we could do that because we were fit enough to ride up and down mountains and through the French countryside, and it was absolutely smashing. So that was that was kind of us, if you like. And then we discovered whole food plant-based nutrition through a couple of connections that Liz had, and she was doing a project on oral health, and revisited the amount of sugar in food, which really annoyed me when I discovered it, because I'd been thinking I was doing without sugar, because we didn't add sugar to anything. We barely had sugar in the house, and yet I discovered that the vast majority of the foods we're eating had 3 or 4 teaspoons of sugar per 100 grams or more, and that really annoyed me. I would normally use stronger language, but it really annoyed me. And then Liz watched Forks Over Knives, and one day when I was relaxing after, said, I think we should stop eating meat and dairy. And I kind of, nearly fell off my chair. And I suddenly had this vision of celery sticks and lettuce leaves, as would be the only remaining things to eat. And I watched Forks Over Knives. And when I heard Esselstyn speaking, I realised that I'd actually, at the back of my mind, had heard about diet treatment of heart disease. And I just thought, people need to know this. If they don't want to eat whole food plant-based and they've got heart disease, that's fine, that's up to them. However, I'm ethically now obliged to let people know. And so is the rest of the medical profession, as far as I'm concerned. Whether they like the idea of plant foods or not is immaterial. The evidence is quite clear. And I was fortunate enough, working at the university, to be able to access all the original papers. So I accessed Esselstyn's work and Ornish's work, and then it kind of just spread from there. We both did the E. Cornell plant-based nutrition certificate, and since then life's been a journey of discovering more and more about this and getting involved in actually trying to make positive change. And the patients that I've talked to who've made the switch are incredibly grateful. They are the ones that are sitting, when I was working as a GP, would be sitting in the waiting room with a smile on their face, bounce into the consulting room, full of energy and thrilled with how much better they are. Whether they needed to take some ongoing medication or not, it was always a power for good. And so that's become our passion, basically. And I realised that what my life's about now, aside from educating medical students in terms of my professional work, is about healing and curing chronic disease. Well, I'm not interested in doing anything else. So it's
Yeah.
You find yourself ethically obliged to take a certain path because of what you know, based on the science that tells
Yes.
us what we know.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because shouldn't then there be more in the health profession that, you know, if the science is there and they've seen it and understand it, then shouldn't more be taking that moral obligation and taking that path that can certainly have more positive effects in terms of treating, even in some cases reversing certain ailments, but at least preventing a lot of them? What seems to be the gap there?
Well, that's a really interesting one, Ben. I mean, I've cogitated on this for a long time, and I don't know the answer. I can only give you my thoughts on it. And I think, firstly, it relates to the way that doctors view the world, and the way that we're taught, which is in a kind of reductionist fashion. You know, imagine we're looking after a forest. Medicine's in there, identifying each tree and bits of the tree and what makes up an individual tree work. And it's hard for an individual doctor to see the wood for the trees, basically. And it's also doesn't take any brain power to do this. So when we're trained, we're trained to diagnose, and with that comes a certain power. And I'm not wanting to suggest that people think about this at the forefront of their mind, but the whole profession kind of hangs its hat on its ability to diagnose disease and then treat it in a way which is beyond what anyone else can do. And it seems to me that something like whole food plant-based nutrition, which is so simple, doesn't take a doctor to say it to anybody, actually can pass underneath the radar of those of us who are focused on making the complicated diagnosis, coming up with a detailed understanding of that particular tree in the forest and how that one might function. That's where our expertise lies. And that's just my supposition from having really kind of delved into personal explorations of our psychology, how we work, things like cognitive dissonance theory, and the fact that our subconscious runs us. So you've got all of that. Then you've got the fact that all of us medics have grown up eating meat, drinking milk, and so on. And when I was a little boy, eating meat was a good thing. I had to eat more of it. And that's because when I was growing up, Britain was just coming out of the post-war years, where the problem with nutrition, like it has been for most of human history, was actually getting enough nutritious calories. And certainly something like meat was helpful in that regard, as was milk, because it was harder to get calorie sufficient diet with all the other foods. Not necessarily at the time I was being brought up, but that was the culture. So we would have puddings that were really sweet, because those were good, plenty of energy. A growing boy, I needed plenty of energy. So a whole lot of doctors have grown up with that kind of thing as well. So when I came across whole food plant-based nutrition, And I thought, oh, I'm ethically obliged to mention it. I then thought, I'm viewing this as a treatment. What are the side effects of this treatment? How will it go wrong? And it took me probably 6 to 8 months of ferreting through literature to reassure myself that there was literally no downside to this. All you had to do was eat tasty food, plenty of it, to your fill, and just make sure you had a variety of it, basically. And it seemed to me once I'd done that, it fits the bill for food. It becomes fun to cook. You've got a tasty meal that you can share with other people. If people ate this way, it would bring us much more closer to the social side of eating that's so important in our lives. And so once I'd reassured myself that it was an okay thing to do, to me to recommend as a health professional, I started letting people know about it. And all I would do was say, look, you might be interested in this. I've read up on it. I can put my hand on my heart and tell you that it's a perfectly safe thing to do, and that it stands a decent chance of curing or reversing, or at least stopping what you've got getting worse. And you're probably going to feel a whole heap better. I'm not saying you have to do it. Just go to this piece of information, look it up, or watch the video, and then come back and tell me if you want to do it.
So I've just got a question here, because I know that you're based rurally, as am I, and that can pose its own kind of unique set of challenges. And oftentimes when I'm dealing with clients where I'm based, it's not just the food they're eating, it's also part of their identity, they're farmers, it's part of their work. How do you go about approaching this topic with that kind of person in your practice?
It's in exactly the same way, Emma. So I talked to a butcher about whole food plant-based nutrition, believe it or not.
Yep.
And he made changes to what he ate. I don't think he went completely whole food plant-based, but I just said to him that I become aware of information to suggest that a meat-heavy diet, which is what he was on, was probably almost certainly contributing to his problem. And that I would think that if he were interested in changing that, he might make some significant inroads into this and have to see me less.
And what would some of those problems be? I mean, raised LDL cholesterol, overweight, some actual ischemic heart disease, etc.
Yes, that kind of thing, and peripheral vascular disease. I think in that sort of instance. So he had elevated cholesterol, elevated blood pressure, circulation not as great as it could be. Now I can give him a medication to bring the blood pressure down, which may or may not have a side effect. I can give him a medication to bring his lipids level down, which may or may not have a side effect. And if I push those levels down by going up with the dosage, I'm much more likely to have a side effect. So probably a number of people who are treated with lipid lowering medication and blood pressure lowering medication still don't have an ideal blood pressure and an ideal lipid profile. And they're still vulnerable to chronic disease.
That's right. It's about, managing versus actually being able to treat the root causes there. And you were involved quite recently, actually, in a paper looking at medication-related harm. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes. Yeah. So, which was interesting. So, roughly about 10% of the prescriptions will result in some sort of harm. Now, the majority of those are relatively minor harms. So it could be feeling sick or getting a transient rash or something like that. However, a small portion of them are much more serious harms. And medications can do harm. And Not meaning to suggest that they're not good, because we have some wonderful treatments available to us nowadays in modern medicine.
Yep.
But it's like if what we put in our mouths 3 times a day kind of shoves us towards disease, and we don't alter that, then taking the medication isn't going to stop the effect of what we put in our mouths. And I never realized the power of what we put in our mouths to the extent that I do now. I mean, I've always advised people to eat more healthily. It's very rare that you come across someone who doesn't believe they're eating healthily. And I would have to say that I had a pretty jaundiced view of lifestyle interventions as a GP, because largely I was telling people what to do, which doesn't work very well. And what I was telling them to do would only make a small difference. So by that, I mean, if you eat a lot of meat and you maybe avoid having sausages with your bacon, you still have your bacon and your fried eggs in the morning. Having an extra apple a day isn't probably going to make a lot of difference to all of that. You substituted an apple for a couple of sausages or whatever. And it wasn't until I came across whole food plant-based nutrition that I realized that, crikey, if you do it properly, it'll work. So what I say to people is that if you want the benefits of this, then do it properly. It's like taking a pill. And if you have to take the pill, twice a day, and you don't take it twice a day, it's not going to work for you. And if your prescription is to eat whole food plant-based nutrition and you do that 3 days a week, it'll have some benefits, but it isn't going to work in the way that it would if you did it 7 days a week. And couching it in those terms, it seems to have landed better for people. And it can bring tears to your eyes when you hear of people going down with disease that they could have done something about, potentially, had they only known.
So we're starting to understand that, and this is drawing a terrible comparison, but it's like climate warming. There's a lot of committed warming we've spoken about very recently, and making small little changes is not going to avoid the inevitable. We might suppress it or might delay it by a few years, hence why we have to be more extreme with what we do with the environment. Same thing with health. And like you say, bringing in 1 or 2 pieces of fruit a day, sure, it has its benefit, but you're still contributing to the underlying issues. So medication is what, masking at times, and it's just suppressing, but the inevitable is you might still have a heart attack, or you might still, you're reducing those good years. So let's talk a little bit about, so we're starting to understand obviously the benefits of a whole food plant-based diet, and the ideal, of course, is more is better. So the closer you go to the end of the spectrum of going completely whole food plant-based, the bigger the result, with the awful side effects of better energy, better skin, better mood, living better quality years. I mean, gosh, it's got to be careful with that. But so let's talk about how to make that transition, and what are the key aspects that we should be focusing on. You talk about sausages and bacon. I mean, we know some things are worse than others. Is that actually the case? Where should we be focusing our initial energy in terms of, excuse the pun on that, but on making that transition? What are the biggest gains we can make?
I think for an individual person, there's 2 routes you can go, which is whole hog, or sort of cold tofu, as I think Peter Johnson says, which I probably prefer, or you can do it gradually. And for me, it's always seemed, what's the motivation to make the change? So we've got a friend with psoriatic arthritis. So spoke to her, about, and fortunately we happened to meet up, and I hadn't heard that she'd had this trouble, and told her about whole food plant-based nutrition. And in her situation, complete switch was probably the best thing to do, because that's the fastest way that she's likely to see some difference in her condition. And if you start seeing a difference in your condition, then that's hugely motivating, because that's what you're making the change for. So if you want to see a difference quickly, you do whole hog. And if you do that, then the best way to do it is to select a date on which you're going to start, clean out the pantry, get rid of all the stuff that you're no longer going to be eating, clean out the fridge, talk to family members, and crucially, ask them for their support, which is, I think, is an absolutely crucial step. You don't try and persuade the family members to eat the same way as you. You say, this disease is crippling me, killing me, really hurting, and I've got to do something about it. And this is what I'm going to do. Will you help me, please? How can you help? And that way, get your social support around, and similarly with friends and so on. Then you have to have some recipes at hand to get going. So under those circumstances, you can make the change. So that if you're starting on the Sunday you go out and do or starting on the Tuesday, Monday you go out and do your shopping. You get in all the stuff that you think you might need, and then you're on a learning curve, and kind of every meal's a new meal for you, and that's where the place of, sometimes for some folk, the sort of so-called transition vegan foods come in. So if people like looking at a burger on their plate, even if they're going cold tofu, as it were, they might have a vegan burger or a vegan sausage to get started, and then fade those out over over 2 or 3 weeks would be my recommendation, because they'll still be, with their added oils and salts and all that sort of stuff, might still be significantly contributing to the issue we're trying to get rid of. And I think I use the analogy of a series of dominoes. You've got all the dominoes in a line, and maybe have some threads spreading out from one another. First domino falls, hits the next domino, goes on and on. That the changes in the body which have occurred to bring on this disease are probably that's the last domino to fall. And if there's been 1,000 dominoes all fallen over on the way there, then it might take a little bit of time to get all those dominoes back up and going again. And so when you start whole food plant-based nutrition, even if you do it fully first time up, then you're giving your body the best chance to get those dominoes up again. But it could take longer, so give yourself a chance. You're going to feel better irrespective of whether your medical condition is cured.
So to give someone, to keep the motivation to keep going down that journey, for someone who, a lot of people are very much, I want a pill and I want to be fixed tomorrow. And, changing your diet, it is a bit of a journey process. And you can get those benefits relatively quickly. So what would be, for someone who has something serious that they want to overcome, like you say, it's 1,000 domino theory here. There's a lot to reverse and undo and get you back on the right track. What can we expect after, say, the first 200 dominoes up? What can we tell someone and say, look, it's going to take time. It's going to take time for certain markers to show the right positive change. But what can those first changes be? What can they first expect to keep that motivation to keep at it? Because after 4-6 weeks, you may not have lost those 20 kgs you desperately need to, or you may not have come off your meds that quickly, because it's not going to happen. But what can we first start to see?
It's a great question, Ben. And I think it's most illustrated by a particular patient that I saw This was a lady in her mid-70s, and she was miserable. So you're sort of tempted to make a diagnosis of, you think, oh, there's some underlying depression going on. And long face, looked pale, sort of hobbled into the consulting room, sore joints all over, and vague complaints all over her body. The next time I saw her, which was a couple of months later, I called her, I'll never forget it, I called her name out in the waiting room, and up from the seat pops this bright, smiling lady who bounces down the corridor, overtakes me into the consulting room, and that's what can happen for folk. Now, any underlying disease process was still there to be largely reversed. But what had happened for her was that she'd probably adjusted her microbiome because she was eating whole food plant-based, and that had adjusted her mental health and mood. She'd reduced some inflammation in her sore joints, so the joints were no longer sore, and she just felt energetic, and she'd lost some. She wasn't obese, but she fell into that sort of overweight category. She's just carrying a little bit extra, and that had started to disappear. So she just had more energy, and there was a sparkle to her eye, and life was enjoyable. And that in itself can be a real hook for somebody, just feeling so much better. And then if you've got a particular disease to reverse, let's say it's type 2 diabetes, then you might be prepared to persist for longer, knowing that already your blood sugar's better controlled. The next time you go to the doctor, you might be able to come off some medication because he or she will be really pleased with your glycated hemoglobin, and your blood pressures probably come down a bit. But unless you're seeing the GP, you're not going to know your blood pressure is going to come down. You just know that, oh, actually, I feel good. I'm probably sleeping better than I was. I'll wake up in the morning and ping, I've got that, like in the adverts on telly when something works really well, they get that little ring around them. That's what it's like.
Yeah. And frame of mind, of course, is important as well. So just that positive feeling has a positive effect on the recovery process as well, because it's less of that negativity, the stress, and so on. So that has a flow-on effect as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so the people that have probably changed switched their nutrition under my guidance have been at a point where they felt stuck, whether they recognized it or not. And I just pointed them in a direction which offered them the opportunity of being unstuck. And they've taken it from there, really. I think the person who has a family is wanting to do more prevention rather than curing disease, has probably in some ways got a harder job. And that's where I would talk to people about switching to whole food plant-based nutrition on a gradual basis. And by gradual, I'm talking about maybe over 7 or 8 weeks. And a particular program so that it's not ad hoc. So we'll start by making all our breakfasts whole food plant-based. And then what we'll do is we'll add in one whole food plant-based dinner per week. Make sure it's one that we enjoy. We'll make enough of it to have a whole food plant-based lunch the next day. And then we just keep adding. So if we did that for Tuesday lunchtime, we'd have the rest of Monday's dinner. So we've had a whole food plant-based breakfast and a whole food plant-based lunch, and the night before was whole food plant-based. Come around again, Monday we do the same thing. So we've got whole food plant-based breakfast, whole food plant-based dinner. Tuesday is whole food plant-based breakfast, whole food plant-based lunch, whole food plant-based dinner now, because this is day 2. And so we edge into Wednesday with the lunch. And if you follow that model, it's 7 weeks of transition. And family can discover whether they like the food, and usually they will. The challenge with doing it that way, and I warn people about this, is that when you're transitioning gently over, what you're not doing is removing the stimulus of high salt, high fat, high sugar foods from your environment. And it seems that we've evolved to seek out preferentially those kind of foods for good reason, because when we were evolving, most of the time we were dealing with food shortages. And it's well recognized now that the food industry stick more of those things into our foods to make us eat more than we normally would, which is why that's probably the leading contender for the reason why people are eating 500 more calories a day at least than they used to be when they're doing less exercise. And if you want a practical example of it, just think about the last time you had some potato crisps. You know, you stick your hand in the crisp and it's got that lovely barbecue salty flavour, and I'll have another one. And before you know it, you finish the packet. Oh, there's another packet sitting there, I'll just have that. And then that's how it works.
Yeah. Well, that's Pringle's favourite
once you pop, you can't stop, right?
Exactly.
That's right. And the foods are designed to do that. So if you run an functional MRI scan of people while they're eating those foods, the area that's lighting up is your dopamine reward center. So it's just using our biology against us in these foods. But all of those foods are man-made, and that's why they're rubbish, because mankind hasn't understood that it's not about eating the tree, it's about consuming the wood, if you apply that analogy to food. Which is why I love Gregor's saying that the active ingredient of broccoli is, and this is a secret, guys, it's broccoli. It's not the sulforaphane. It's not the sulforaphane.
Yeah.
It's the broccoli.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Our reductionist mindset has got us, and nutrition science, unfortunately, has dutifully followed the scientific paradigm, which has done so much for us in the world today. It also brought with it some harms, completely inadvertently. That reductionist paradigm means that we start talking about food in terms of their carbohydrates, their fats, their proteins, instead of talking about foods which actually contribute to health and foods which don't, or foods which will only contribute to health under certain circumstances. And if I'm yet to go somewhere and hear someone talking about nutrition and say, the environment that I'm talking about nutrition is one where people have enough to eat, calorie-wise, with minimal effort expended. And in that environment, these foods are healthy and have all been shown to contribute to health. And if we would have a conversation like that, we three wouldn't need to be having this interview. Would be the
yeah, we'd stick just to the environmental aspects, but nutrition's still part of it.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, you've raised a lot of really good points here, especially about how our food system is set up at the moment, and how addictive certain foods are. which, I mean, you can't get around this fact that a lot of people do struggle with that greatly. So it is important to kind of find your community while you're making these kinds of changes. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about this CHIP program, this Complete Health Improvement Program that you'll be running very soon. Now, just to set the scene for everyone, if you haven't heard us talking about this before, very well researched. So there's more than 25 peer-reviewed publications, including, randomized controlled trials on this. The American College of Lifestyle Medicine has even described it as some of the most impressive clinical outcomes published in the literature to date. So it's a really powerful program, and it's got the ability to significantly improve health for people. So tell us a little bit more about the program in general. So what could someone expect if they signed up to follow this, and if people can still take part in the program that you're running very shortly?
CHIP stands for the Complete Health Improvement Program, and the focus of the CHIP program that Liz and I are about to run is on people with type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes, and there's a reason for that I'll explain in a second. So anyone doing that program can expect a complete improvement in their health overall, and they can also expect to make serious inroads into their diabetes. And for some people, it might be actually possible for them to get rid of it and cure themselves, as long as they sustain the lifestyle changes. And that's such a hugely powerful thing. I've never been able to offer anyone a cure for their diabetes before. And that the CHIP program started off as the coronary heart or coronary health improvement program. So it was aimed in the States at people with heart disease. And it certainly will improve a whole lot of parameters for heart disease too. And the importance of that for folk with type 2 diabetes is that heart disease is probably the biggest cause of mortality in people with type 2 diabetes. You're at high risk, very high risk of heart disease if you have type 2 diabetes. And that's much more understandable to me now that I know what's actually going on in the body in relation to what we do exercise-wise, and most importantly, what we put in our mouths. And the CHIP program is really well set up. It gives people some cogent information on their health and what changes in lifestyle can do for their health. It then gives them room to ask questions around that and set their own goals. So it's when someone comes into a CHIP program, a facilitator like myself isn't going to be walking around saying, you should do this. I will be helping people work out what's best for them to do. So while encouraging them to take the biggest step they possibly can. So if you took on board everything that was in the CHIP program, and you had type 2 diabetes, let's say, and you'd had it for 3 or 4 years, I would say that you stood a really good chance of actually getting rid of that diabetes and being able to forget about it in the future, just simply by making those lifestyle changes. Now, if you want that, you have to make all the changes. If you want a sniff of it and you just make a sniff of changes, then that's all you'll get, is just a little sniff. But what you will have is an exposure to a group of people who are working on the same thing as you at the same time, and the support of that group. And you won't forget the kind of things that you've learned. And so what can happen, this is by report from people who've run a number of CHIP programs, is that some people who struggle to make the change when they first went onto the CHIP program, it sowed a seed for them that otherwise would never have been sown. And they make their change a few years later. And that's absolutely fine, assuming that nothing's gone terribly wrong for them in the interim. And that's one of the beauties of it, is that the program accepts people where they're at, helps them work out where they want to go, and helps them work out if they want to take a big step. Now, for us, with the program that we're running, we're really keen on having people who are prepared to take a big step. And the reason for that is that our program's been funded by the local primary health organisation. So I think this is a first in New Zealand to have a health funder actually back CHIP. And so there's Liz and I doing this in Alexandria, which is in central Otago, by the way, Emma, not Southland. And there's a GP who's just trained in lifestyle medicine in Wanaka, and she's also going to run a program at a similar time to us. And then there's 2 GPs in Dunedin who also just got ASLM certification. And that came about because I had a chat with one of the guys working for the PHO about whole food plant-based nutrition and lifestyle change, and he was trying to work out ways that they could fit it into their programs, and then all of a sudden this opportunity cropped up. And funding systems being the way they are, what it means is we have to get the program finished by June, the end of June. So we've got a very tight time frame. So people, if anyone listening to this podcast is in the Alex area or nearby Alex and can get into Alex for an evening session on CHIP, and they've got type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, or they know of someone who has that condition and want to let them know about it, then all they have to do is get in touch with the general practice called Health Central, and get in touch with Emily Gifford, who's administering this for us at the practice, just to signal their interest. There is an information evening held tomorrow, which is going to be after you put this podcast up.
So last week, actually.
So this is last week when people listen to this. And places are limited. So if places get filled following our information evening, then people will have to wait till the next time we run CHIP. And our Liz and I will be running CHIP. We probably might do it virtually from our website, which is likely to have a small cost for people. Hopefully, the results from this one will mean that the health authorities will continue to fund CHIP for designated groups. And that's what we hope to be running in the future. So one way or another, there will be ongoing CHIP programs. And if I have my way, there'll be some funded CHIP programs done through the health authority, but we'll be offering them anyway. And it's the cost of doing CHIP is not exorbitant. It's just that if you at the low socioeconomic end of the scale, which unfortunately makes you more likely to have chronic disease, and particularly if you're Maori or Pacifica in New Zealand, then you're likely to be in a situation of not having a lot of dosh to spend on things, and probably most in need of something like CHIP. And hopefully we'll, for that group, we'll either look at other ways of getting support to get them involved, and or the health authorities will continue to fund. So we have our fingers crossed for it, because it's a big first for Otago Southland. And we have thankfully, a PHO, which is probably one of the more go-ahead ones in New Zealand. So that they've set some standards in terms of innovation, and this kind of reflects that capability. So that really exciting. So we've got our fingers crossed that it's all going to work, that we've got plenty of people who want to do it, and that we get a result which is enough to swing it for the health authority.
Well, we certainly wish you a lot of luck in kicking off the first one, but I think once people start, because like you say, it's a community, so once the first group starts exhibiting some positive results out of that, I think that'll certainly encourage more to join the program in the future. Now, you mentioned your website. It is a brand new website. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what we can expect to find on there? Why should we click on your website, what it's called, and so on?
Yeah, the company that we've got is called Life-Strong Health, and if you're at all interested in your health and in improving your health and well-being, then you should click on it. And first up, there's just going to be a landing page, but that's going to kind of tell you a little bit about Liz and myself. We're both trained in lifestyle medicine and are interested in whole food, plant-based nutrition, and just start to give you some pointers, and then stay interested in the website, put it on your bookmark, because it won't be long after that a whole suite of things is going to start appearing. So it's going to be, our focus is helping people improve their health, improve their well-being, cure their chronic disease, or at least treat it with lifestyle medicine, and actually really enjoy life, rather than having a period of time, maybe often towards the end of life, where you're putting up with chronic disease. Actually able to enjoy it, be active, play with the grandkids, be able to go for walks with the grandkids, that kind of thing. So if that sort of stuff hooks people's interest, then that's the reason why they should keep tabs on Life-Strong Health. Now,
just as an extra thing here, you are I believe, a committee member for the Evidence-Based Eating New Zealand, and they have a series of public lectures coming up around the country: Christchurch, Wellington, Auckland, and Dunedin. And you are a speaker, a presenter. So for those in the area that want to listen to Dr. Martyn Williamson, as well as a couple of others, other fascinating speakers, that will be on Sunday, the 1st of August. We will also place a link to that in our show notes. So you will be presenting on avoiding severe illness. So I guess a kind of little bit of what we've spoken about today. Now, something else I do want to ask, your background, your family's background in cycling. I believe you do dabble a little bit in coaching as well. How often do you take the opportunity to, when you're coaching youngsters, to also look at what they're eating? And, there's always the initial, well, I need my protein, I need my iron, I need all these certain elements to make me a competitive athlete. But, do you factor that in a little bit and, sort of plant the seed with the youngsters and encourage them down a certain path?
Well, Ben, I haven't actually coached anyone for a while, but at the time that I was doing it, I was before I came across whole food plant-based nutrition, and I was interested in coaching kids who wanted to do really well. And if they wanted to do really well, then they did. And it was quite fascinating how you could get that to happen. And nutrition was part of that. And it came down to basically eating healthy, wholesome foods at the right time, having the healthiest food for like you've got to eat when you're doing a bike race. That's the I grew up never eating in the middle of sport because I was told it would give you stomach cramps and so on. You have no show of competing in a bike race without shoveling something down your throat.
For sure.
And I can recall nearly passing out from low blood sugar at the end of one ride in the early days. That dramatically changed my views on all of this. And I think the thing with children and young people, where I've noticed it going wrong is if they're given a whole lot of nutritional information, and in cycling, people often worry about weight. And what can happen is that the high performing person takes this to the nth degree. That's why they're high performing. And I've seen that probably do more harm than good. I mean, I prefer that they'd eat enough calories. And if they're getting that from a Big Mac, and that's affecting their ability to race, we'll tackle that. But I definitely don't want them to undereat. And that's that was the biggest trap, especially for girls. Yeah. Now, when I'm talking to athletes, if I were doing that same thing now, I'd be advising them on the calorie sufficiency and which foods are likely to improve their performance. I would reassure them about the protein thing, as that basically the Western diet's got more than enough protein in it, and the evidence is absolutely clear cut. I think people are arguing who might argue with this evidence have got their head in the sand or have got some sort of vested interest. That animal protein can lead to harmful health effects. It just happens to be how it is, whether you like it or not. And if you ate only plants and you eat enough calories to allow you to do what it is that you want to do, you're going to get ample protein. You're still going to get more protein than you need. There's absolutely no need to have protein supplements if you're eating a healthy, if you're on healthy nutrition. And if you want your blood vessels to be just nice and perky and flexible and to have maximum blood flow through them when you're exerting yourself, then eat whole food plant-based nutrition and plenty of leafy greens and beets. And then you're going to have wonderful blood flow. And with all the antioxidants that you get from the wide range of colours, you'll find that you beat yourself up doing some exercise. The normal post-exercise muscle soreness is vastly reduced in my experience. And you can bounce back when you're ready to do the next session. And so you're going to get fitter faster because your recovery's improved. And the way to get to the top is to recover faster than the next guy. Because everybody's prepared to work hard, but if they haven't recovered, then they either start digging themselves a hole, which is the art of coaching, knowing not to dig the hole because you're exercising too hard. So the faster you recover, the better you're going to be, and that's kind of the bedrock of improving at sports in my view. Yeah.
Well, I think you've definitely nailed it. I think the biggest issue is calorie deficiency for sure, and that's well documented even here in New Zealand across multiple sporting codes. And men as much as women now, it's used to always be the thought of just women have these eating disorders in the sporting world, but men as much so because of the pressures of weight classes or, I need to look fit, or in the cycling world, as you know, if you want to be an all-rounder or a climber, you need to be leaner. The issue, like you say, is calorie deficiency, so you're not getting enough nutrients to actually recover. Cycling is generally a multi-day sport. not just training but competing as well. So and for kids as well, it's not eating enough, and that's something I come across with a lot of people. It's actually, and athletes I coach myself, it's not so much what they're eating. They could be eating well and they could be eating perfectly, but they're not eating enough for the fear of putting on weight. And that is
absolutely
such a big issue. Especially the irony is, the more plants you eat, then in most cases you can actually lose more weight as well, until your body finds that balance. So that fear shouldn't be there, and that's certainly an issue.
Yeah, agree entirely, Ben. And I think the wonderful thing about whole food plant-based nutrition, if you were wanting to get to the top in your sport, is that if you feel hungry, you eat. You don't have to worry about it, and your body's going to take care of your of the fat content. And for a cyclist, that means that if you're competing at the top level and you fall off your bike, you're much less likely to break a bone. If you follow professional cycling, you see the number of people who are young, fit, and healthy, but really lean, fall off the bikes, and they've got a fracture that your average weekend warrior wouldn't normally get until they're older. And I'm sure I've seen it in blokes as well, like you pointed out. They're incredibly lean, too lean, just tried to squeeze off that extra little bit of fat to get up the hill faster, and they've got no power and no energy. So they start going downhill, so they train harder, and the whole thing goes down the gurgle, and then they give up because it's all got too low.
They should all train to be sprinters, and then at least it's all about the power to weight ratio, and got a bit more on there.
Fat doesn't help you in cycling in any way at all, unfortunately.
Exactly, true.
Yeah.
No, look, it's Martyn, this has been a fascinating conversation. We really appreciate your time. A lot of things coming up for you. The CHIP program, certainly something that we can only encourage those in the area that if it's not them, but they know of people that would benefit from it, to sign up to. Your website, that's going to take a lot of work, creating content, putting it on there. We know the amount of time we need to put into that. But we'll link all that in our show notes. But super busy, yourself and Liz. And we do note, we didn't mention it, but you have been nominated, both you and your wife, Liz, as Plant-Based Practitioners of the Year back in 2019. That's obviously credit to the wonderful work that you're doing.
Yeah, no, that was really thrilling to actually get that. And that was at the Veg and Vines conference organised by Nick Wright and Morgan, his partner. And when my recollection of Nick when he announced it was that he'd been impressed by the fact that I was a practitioner more towards the end of my practicing life, who'd actually embraced whole food plant-based nutrition and had made a big push in whatever ways I'd done it. So that was, and Liz has done that with me, and in her role as a dentist. So it was really exciting to get that award. Just one other thing to mention coming up for the future with us, Ben, is Liz and I are guest educators at a retreat at a wonderful place called Aroha in Glenorchy, just out of Queenstown. And so if any of you listeners want to indulge and have a lovely winter holiday and retreat, a week at Aroha, whether we're talking or not, is really worthwhile. And the last week in August, not only will you get all the facets of healthy lifestyle at the retreat, you'll also get some education on how it works and why it works for you from Liz and I. And that week, Aroha will shift to whole food, plant-based, no added oil nutrition. And they've got their chefs come up with some really wonderful recipes. It's completely plant-based nutrition on offer there anyway, but they're going to cut out those oils. And I suspect that once the kitchen team has tried that and they've eaten those foods, that they're probably not wanting to go back particularly, because you'll get that heavy feeling in your stomach again when you consume a plant-based meal that's been slathered in oil, which is just extra calories with no nutritional benefit. So, and you don't do your gut bugs any favors. So, yeah, we're there in that last week, and you'll hear us talk. If anyone who goes will hear us talking about what is our passion. You can probably tell from how I've been gabbling on for the whole, however long we've done it for. I could go on for days. It's such an exciting and important thing.
So once again, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your passion. And like you've just said, it's clearly testament to it's never too late to make that change. And for you, not only have you made the change, but the way you're influencing such a big community in the bottom part of New Zealand, often forgotten about. But yeah, it's really amazing the work you do. So thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Yeah, thanks Ben and Emma for inviting me. Never too late. I think that's a great phrase for lifestyle medicine. If you're in your mid-90s and you've got a health problem, it's never too late. You can still feel better by eating whole food plant-based. Enjoy the last 2 years of your life. I don't see why one wouldn't want to do that. So it literally is never too late. So thanks very much. Really enjoyed our talk.
Thank you for listening to the Lentil Intervention podcast. If you found this interesting, make sure you subscribe and share it with your friends.